Welcome. I'm Matthew Phelps, co-author of the Turning to God's Word Bible study, The Gospel According to John, an encounter with grace and truth. Today we'll be talking about lesson 10 of our study, which covers the Gospel According to John, chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. Where we left off, we see there is a conflict between Jesus and the Pharisees that they're trying to win via shaping the narrative around who Jesus is and where he's from. We also saw that didn't work and suggested that they might need to try something a little bit more aggressive, which is what happens here. So the next day, feast is over. Jesus hasn't left town yet. Jesus comes again into the temple and again starts teaching. And again, everybody seems to be paying a lot of attention to that, which provides a very public setting for this thing that's about to happen, which is what the Jewish leaders are counting on. And this next part is going to be, we'll talk about it as it develops. This is their next attempt to discredit Jesus and to shape the narrative. And to do that, they find a woman. It's very lucky that they managed to, no it's not, that they managed to find a woman currently in the act of committing adultery just now, just when, they exactly need to catch somebody in order for, before all the people leave town for the feast, and right when Jesus is one more time teaching before everybody departs and goes their own way. They've got this short window of time, and they magically manage to find right now a woman who is caught in the act of committing adultery. And the next round of interplay between Jesus and the Jewish leaders focuses around this woman. So that's the setup back in the temple area. And this poor woman has gotten dragged into the middle of the conflict between Jesus and the Jewish leaders. As we move through this lesson, we'll talk more about what the setup looks like and how all of this plays out. So let's get into it. So now we see that this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Which is a relevant fact. And then also relevant fact, they cite the law of Moses about what should happen. She should be stoned. Which does mean, if you check back into the law as it's written, that she was definitely caught in the act in order for stoning to be required. And the law says another interesting thing, which they conveniently leave out here, which is that both parties are supposed to be stoned. It's not just the woman. When you think about the fact that they very conveniently were able to right away find a woman who was committing adultery, and at the same time they forget to bring the man, this kind of strongly suggests that this may have been, while not false, contrived, right? Imagine a world, and this is, again, hypothetical, you don't have to see all of this way. It just seems like a strong possibility, where one of these Jewish leaders, for shame, has a mistress on the side, and, now they need a next layer of attack on Jesus, and so uses his mistress in this really extremely not nice way to help manufacture something against Jesus. Because we'll see what the trap is as it unfolds here on Jesus. It's a pretty clever trap, even if it ultimately fails to work. But this all screams they're setting this up on purpose. And they would need people and resources they have access to. If they want to guarantee finding somebody committing adultery, the easiest way to do it is to go commit some adultery and then to drag in the poor woman you were doing it with. So it at least seems very strongly possible that could be what's going on here. The guy involved is never mentioned and is not essential to either how the trap plays out or how Jesus' response to it plays out. but it does suggest something about the character of these people that Jesus is dealing with that kind of is suggested anyway, but it's at least a thing we're thinking about. But at any rate, we have before us now Jesus teaching in front of a bunch of people, and now we have a woman caught in the act of committing adultery that the law of Moses says should be stoned. That's the execution of the trap. And we'll see as we progress through, we'll talk through all the moving parts and what's at play and how it's supposed to work. They said this to test him. What's the test? Since we know explicitly that this is a test, we can talk through the moving parts. No one is challenging whether the law of Moses has been broken. That's not the test. We're taking that for granted. She is guilty of the crime that she's being accused of. And the law of Moses does say what the law of Moses says. For the sake of argument, let's just assume those things. Whether her guilt is mitigated by being set up or any number of other things, let's not worry about any of that. For the sake of the trap, she is guilty. The law of Moses says she should be killed. What's the trap then? What happens if Jesus says, you're right, the law of Moses says we should kill her, let's get on that? The Jews don't have sole political authority here over Jerusalem or Judah. They answer to the Romans. And we'll see later that, in the case of Jesus himself, that they can't, without Roman permission, put someone to death, even if that person should be put to death by their law. That'll be a big point when they're trying to kill Jesus. So what happens if Jesus incites a mob to kill someone according to the Jewish law? Well, the Romans are going to hate that. And they will catch and deal with Jesus. So Jesus' choice is, I will uphold the law of Moses, and in so doing, become subject myself to the punishment of Rome, or I will go on public record saying, we don't need to worry about following the law of Moses. I'm not for that. I think we should skip it. If he stones her, the Romans get rid of their Jesus problem for them. If he doesn't, he delegitimizes himself, and they can say he's not for the law of Moses. So he's clearly not the Messiah or anyone we should listen to. They think they have found this dilemma, two horns, right? He's either going to impale himself on the one horn or the other one. And they think they found a place with no out for him. He either falls into one trap or the other, and either way he's stuck. That's the core of what they're attempting to do here. And so they bring that up against Jesus, and he kneels down and starts writing on the ground. What they weren't expecting Jesus to do is ignore them, which is what he's doing. A whole lot has been speculated about what Jesus is writing on the ground. I think it's significant and important to mention it doesn't actually matter, right? Within the context of what the trap is, what matters is he's not engaging at all, right? He's supposed to choose one way or the other, and either way he's in a real hot water. And they probably really don't care which way he goes because they win either way. And instead, he doesn't go either way. He's stalling. And they keep saying, it says they keep asking him. They're pushing him and trying to get him to pick a side. Well, Jesus, but what are we going to do? But Jesus, what do we need to do? But what are we going to do? And they just keep pushing him because they need him to pick. It doesn't matter, but they need him to pick. And so they keep trying to get him to. So then he dramatically gets up and basically, I don't know if any of you have played the card game Uno. There's a card in it that's a reverse card that you can use to take what somebody is trying to do to penalize you and turn it back around on them. He basically gets up and says, reverse, and says, yeah, you guys are all also under the law of Moses, you all are the Jewish leaders. You likewise should be killing this woman by what you're suggesting is the law of Moses. Let's go. Yeah, I'm all in. I'm not saying that that's not the law. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I'm just saying as the Jewish leaders, knock yourselves out. Yeah, let's stone her. Here's a rock. Because, of course, if they do, they fall into that branch of their trap themselves. They're not enforcing the law of Moses where it demands death, because they've ceded that authority to the Romans, and they're not willing to frustrate or anger the Romans because it could be death to them. So they've, as a policy, stopped putting people to death even when the law of Moses suggests it, which is then the thing they try to throw Jesus into doing. And he just says, yeah, no, you're right, we should do that, and you should start. So go ahead. And then he just gets back down and keeps drying a camel or whatever. Again, it doesn't actually matter what he's writing because it's just a stall tactic. There are a lot of interesting speculations on it, and it's an interesting thing to think about. But for the sake of how the trap plays out, it doesn't matter at all. It's just stalling. He could be playing a trumpet, or he could be literally twiddling his thumbs, or solving a Rubik's Cube, or you can picture any kind of I'm not doing anything thing that he could be doing at all. And it has the same force of just kind of casually waiting, and as they push him saying, yeah, you're absolutely right, we need to put this woman to death, here's a rock, is basically what he says. And then now we have, instead of Jesus being the one subject to this trap, now we have to see what they're going to do about it. So how did the Jewish leaders respond to having their trap turned back around on them? The same way they have up until now. They are not going to risk the wrath of Rome against them for putting to death some woman that probably was a contrived situation anyway, but they definitely don't care enough about killing this woman to risk their own lives. And you can see it starts with the most elder of these people, the ones probably who are at the forefront of setting up this trap, who are most keenly aware of what will be the consequences if they do what Jesus is suggesting, and they just sort of slink off. Whose authority is delegitimized when that happens? We still have the question of what's Jesus going to do, because he's actually not said this woman doesn't deserve to be stoned at this point. He's still in the camp of when he says, basically, no, you. He's starting down the pathway of let's stone this woman. So we still have to see what Jesus is going to do. But first, we have to see what they're going to do. And what they do is they cower away. And they don't say, because they can't at this point, well, the law of Moses isn't clear about this and we're not sure. Because they started with very strongly, definitely the law of Moses requires that we stone this woman. So they have no hedges, so they just turn around and silently walk off and hope that people forget about that, or that there aren't that many people around. Oldest first, down to the youngest, but all of the Jewish leaders walk off. So they have demonstrated that as a matter of convenience, they will not follow the law of Moses. So when we look at relative power and authority under the law of Moses, they have lost a lot, but Jesus still has to respond here as well. Because them leaving doesn't actually disarm the trap. It just puts them in the same side as Jesus. We still have, or as everybody assumes Jesus is, of course, at this point probably not going to kill her either, or he would have. But that's not established yet. Jesus still has to respond. But for their part, the Jewish leaders have shown they have no backbone and don't actually care enough about enforcing the law of Moses to assume any personal risk to themselves. So that's their response. Now we have to figure out what Jesus is going to do. Jesus now, for what seems like the first time, talks to the woman. Sets up with a question. Where are they? Which is a great question, right? If you imagine that there's still a whole crowd here who have not needed to slink off because they're not the ones who Jesus was suggesting do the stoning, you can imagine we still have an audience, and he starts with, so we were going to kill you, where did everyone go? She's probably understandably very, very tense right now. That question doesn't exactly ease the tension, but at the same time, it definitely gets the attention of the crowd, right? And focuses it on Jewish leaders have not wanted to follow through on what they said. It focuses everybody on they're not following what they say is the law here. The idea of condemning or judging is one of passing sentence, right? It's not one of, and that'll be important elsewhere in this gospel as well. It's not, do I say something is right or wrong, right? It's not a judgment of right, wrong. It's a sentencing. It's a wrong was committed, here's what happens as a result of it. So that's what they haven't done, is haven't they passed sentence on you? First, where did they go? And then, wait, did no one pass sentence on you? And she says, no one. And then Jesus just leaves it with, and again, Jesus is still in this trap, just says, me neither. But I didn't leave, right? I didn't slink away shamefully and refuse to acknowledge what's going on. I'm just telling you that, we were talking about Moses. One of my points all along, my Jesus points all along, has been I am a more direct line to God than Moses is. And there are problems with the manifestation of the law of Moses and the interpretation of it. And in this case, I'm not saying that you didn't sin. In fact, I'm going to say do not sin again, which implies that I think you did do something wrong. What I'm saying is I'm not going to say you're going to die for that. The irony here is thick, because that's the human problem that Jesus is here to solve, is that everyone has sinned, and in that sin, everyone in theory should be dead. And in actuality, at this point, is. Everyone has sinned, and God's judgment against all of those people is death. And Jesus has explicitly come to say, yeah, you all have sinned, you all merit a judgment of death, and I'm here to make that not apply. So, law of Moses, correct, all of you, all of humanity, you deserve death. And I, Jesus, uniquely am here to say, I'm not going to carry out the law of Moses that way. I'm not going to pass that judgment on you, woman who is committing adultery, on you, Pharisees and scribes who just did a really crappy thing, on any of you. I'm here to not do that. I'm here so that judgment doesn't have to be passed. Not only on this woman, but on everyone. I'm not here to say she didn't do anything wrong. I'm not here to say any of you didn't do anything wrong. I'm here to say that doesn't mean you have to die, any of you. And that's the mission and work of Jesus. And it's through what he's doing that will be true. So yes, he has a unique authority to, without violating the law of Moses, to allow those who by it should be dead to nonetheless live. Because he's going to assume that guilt. So their response, the Jewish leaders' response, is to hightail it out of there because they don't want to face the question. Jesus' response is, I'm going to die for you. Yes, death is needed. Yes, you're guilty. Yes, somebody has to die. Why can't it just be me? And then you can go on your merry way. And don't sin anymore. He doesn't stop there being a punishment. He redirects it toward himself. And in so doing, he's able to pardon her because he takes upon himself the guilt that is due to her. the trap they put him in is challenging the fundamental nature of what he's there to do for humanity, which of course they don't realize. And he shows to them the inadequacy of the law of Moses and everything that they're doing to carry out justice. He turns their ill-intentioned trap around on them, and then he uses that as an opportunity to show what he is there to do, and what he's looking to do from a teaching point of view and a mission point of view. It's an incredibly powerful thing. Just by short way of comment, it's not worth over speculation, but there are people who think that this little passage isn't original to the Gospel according to John, with as well as it fits thematically and in terms of writing style. And I think this is a perfect transition from where we just were and to where we're going. It seems to me just like there's an extremely strong case for not only that of canon and the ruling of the church, but also for just from how it's written and where it is, for this being original and an intended part of the Gospel according to John. I think some of the people who don't see that are not seeing the thematic continuity between this and the rest of it. But to me, it fits in very well. Even a lot of language is similar. It builds on themes of Moses, calls Jesus Lord. There's so many things that are consistent with what we see elsewhere. And it fits exactly in the narrative of these guys need to discredit Jesus. They try to discredit Jesus. And John uses it as a way of refocusing the narrative on who really is Jesus and what is he trying to do. And it's that theme that we'll pick up and take into the next part of the gospel. Is after all this noise around who is Jesus, he emerges from his time in Jerusalem as Jesus is the one who sees and recognizes guilt and does not condemn. And he is the voice of God that allows not judgment, not judgment, right? He allows the judgment not be necessary, and instead, I guess you could almost say pardon, but it's not like he tells the woman, you're not guilty. It's not a not guilty verdict. It's a guilty but verdict. It's a guilty but no punishment verdict. It's never, I'm coming and saying not guilty. It's just, okay, no punishment. So the law of Moses is upheld in that its guilt is found, its punishment is just changed. And we'll see how he continues to draw out and emphasize that theme as we go forward from here as well. This has been an overview of Lesson 10 of the Turning to God's Word Bible Study, The Gospel According to John, an encounter with grace and truth. For more information, consult our written study and visit us online at turningtogodsword.com.